Wherever you go, however you go. For energy on the go, it's got to be 5-Hour Energy. Works fast, works long, tastes good, and with 0 sugar and 4 calories, there's nothing holding you back. Fits your pocket, fits your backpack, fits your on-the-go life wherever and whenever you need to feel alert and energized. 5-Hour Energy. Energy on the go. Want to save money on 5-Hour Energy's most popular flavors? Just go to your neighborhood Walmart. Get to Old Navy for 30% off your entire purchase, 40% off your purchase when you use or open and use an Old Navy credit card, even on denim like the new must-have fit, the boyfriend, and textured sweaters. That's 30% off your entire purchase, 40% off when you use or open and use an Old Navy credit card. Now at Old Navy and OldNavy.com. Valid 9/25 to 9/29. Excludes in-store clearance, gift cards, register lane items today only, and extra special deals and jewelry. 40% off subject to credit card approval. See stores or OldNavy.com for details.
Welcome to the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, episode number 347. Success is never owned, it's rented, and the rent is due every day. Anonymous.
Broadcasting from the back alley in Hollywood, it's the Indie Film Hustle Podcast, where we show you how to survive and thrive as an indie filmmaker in the jungles of the film biz. And here's your host, Alex Ferrari.
Welcome, my Indie Film Hustlers, to another episode of the Indie Film Hustle Podcast. I am your humble host, Alex Ferrari. Today's show is sponsored by Music Bed. As filmmakers, we're always looking for songs and music for our projects, but it's such a pain in the butt to license and go get music, and it's just been a nightmare. But Music Bed has changed all of that. You can download a single song, get unlimited music with a subscription, or even create a custom song or score from scratch. They already have over 20,000 songs, beautifully categorized, and their catalog is growing every single day. If you want to check it out, just go to indiefilmhustle.com/musicbed. And because you are Indie Film Hustle Tribe members, you get 1 month for free to try it out, or 20% off a single song purchase. Just enter the promo code IndieFilmHustle. Today's show is also sponsored by Blackmagic Design's DaVinci Resolve. And as many of you have known over the years, DaVinci Resolve is my preferred editing software. I edited my first 2 features on it. I've edited multi-million-dollar shows for Legendary Pictures as well as Hulu and many other projects. It is a workhorse and amazing. It is the only 8K editing software that also has world-class color grading, visual effects, and audio post-production all in one software. And the best thing about it, you can download a copy of it for free. Or you can pay $2.99 to get the full studio package, which is a bargain. If you want to download it, just head over to blackmagicdesign.com. Today's guest is legendary author Steve Katz, whose book, Film Directing Shot by Shot, Visualizing from Concept to Screen, is been one of the best-selling books on directing ever. It is a book that had a huge impact on me, and the book is celebrating its 25th anniversary and has sold hundreds of thousands of copies over those years. And I wanted to have Stephen on so I can pick his brain on what he has learned over the course of his career and all the massive amount of research he put into this legendary book. I mean, he has like over 800 photos, illustrations, and is by far the most comprehensive look at shot design ever put to print. So without any further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Steve Katz. I'd like to welcome to the show Steve Katz. Man, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you know, guys, so if you guys don't know Steve's work, he wrote a book, a seminal book for filmmakers called Shot by Shot back in 1991. And that book was one of the first books I ever read on the craft of directing. And it was around the time I was getting into college. And it changed my life. It really did. It was a wonderful book. And it's something that I refer to for years to come. It's just one of those seminal, filmmaking books. So I'm super excited to have you on the show, Steve.
Oh, thanks so much. I'm glad people like the book. It's been out there a long time. And we just did the second edition, so long overdue.
Yes. Now, how did you get into the business in the first place?
I was a kid filmmaker, and I grew up in Westport, Connecticut, which is it's in Connecticut and quite near New York. It's considered a bedroom community, like in Mad Men.
Okay.
You know, and so we had a lot of advertising people, but it's known as sort of a Hollywood illustrators art town. We had the famous artist was there, famous photographer, famous writers. Rod Serling was there, lived there, and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Harpo Marx and Betty Davis and Johnny Carson and the Newmans, of course, Paul and Joanne, and many, many, many others. And it had the oldest summer stock in the Westport Country Playhouse, which was a feeder to New York. So there's a lot of this stuff in town, relatively small town, 28,000 people. And my mom was an illustrator in an early part of her life, and then she became a businesswoman. And my dad was very seriously into photography up until I was like 5. Mm-hmm. But, there was an appreciation for that. And in our living room, we had tons of shelves and filled with books. And on the bottom shelf were all the coffee table size books. So from the time I was a little kid, I remember flipping through they were coffee table books about artists and photographers. It was Brett Weston and Minor White and Ansel Adams on photography. And on the art side, it was just, Jansen's History of Art and all that. So I was always doing that. And then when I was, my dad had a camera with a Revere 8mm with a stop motion button. Mm-hmm. And like most kids, I was into Harryhausen and horror films and all that. But I also liked to read. So there was a story impetus as well. But anyway, for 1 year of my life, my dad's company flew him out to California in Atherton, in the San Francisco, in the Menlo Park area. And then one day when I was 9 or 8, I went to the pharmacy kind of magazine store they had the old counter with the stools and they had ice cream and all that. Anyway, make long story short, I find a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, mm-hmm. which is everybody knows it of a certain age. And I'm flipping through it, and it was the first time I was now I love movies at this point, and my mom and dad, well, particularly my mom loved movies. So we would sit there and watch old movies rather than TV shows. This is in the 50s. And then, so I knew a lot about movies because I'd be sitting there with my mom, and she knew all the secondary character actors, like, and whether it was in, Adventures of Robin Hood or whatever it happened to be. Mm-hmm. So I was absorbing all this. And then, so I looked at this magazine in a drugstore, and I'm wow, here's this armature for Willis O'Brien's King Kong model, and Marcel Delgado and his work, and then the illustrators from RKO who were fantastic. So then, make a long story short, I saw storyboards. So it was like, oh my God, this looks. I draw. I like photography. I was encouraged in my photography. So it all kind of came to a head. It was almost right in that moment, I said, wow, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do this animation thing. So I got into that for a while, and that was my start. And then I just started to get books on film. And when I was in high school, we had probably, I think, the best theater company in the United States at Staples High School. And it was run like a professional theater. And the same people there I would go in the summers, and I would sit in the dark in the Westport Country Playhouse because I was working there. And I would watch famous directors direct for, usually for 2 or 3 days before the show started. Would go for a week. So it was Woody Allen, and it was Josh Logan, and many, many, many others. And that was when I was probably 14, 15, around then. And by that time, I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I'd gone from the 8mm to a Bolex. And I also, the other thing that sort of, I guess, pushed me in that direction was that I had a second cousin, my dad's first cousin, Milton Olson, and he was the senior visual effects projectionist in New York City. And he owned all the process gear. So that was like a Mitchell projector, and it's water cooled, carbon arc. And then it had a
carbon arced.
Oh, it was a massive carbon arc. It was like, I think it was like a 14mm carbon maybe. And then I was on set then on Car 54, Where Are You? When I was 10 years old.
Wow.
It 4-star stages up on 126th Street in Manhattan. And then some years after that, I was on a set. I was Burt Reynolds, before he became famous, on a TV show called Hawk. Mm-hmm. And he played an Indian detective in New York.
Yes. And different times.
And I was right. And I was there for all the background projections. So Milton would have me go on there, and I learned how to load and all that stuff before I was 16 years old. And he also did a lot of stuff with projection, with rear projections, with slide projectors and stuff for large corporate presentations. And I got into that as well, and that served me well because when I was 17 Stop me if this is boring you.
Right. I mean, but basically what you're saying is it was kind of destiny, basically.
I guess it was. I mean, I made some choices along the way, but I was, it was just around me. It was just available and nearby, and people close to me encouraged me at some level. Great. Not all the time, but anyway, so I got into light shows, and I did that for the Grateful Dead and a bunch of those things starting when I was 17. Then I played bluegrass banjo for professionally for a few years. And then when I was like 25 or 26, I said, this is ridiculous. I've got to get back to filmmaking. And even along the way, when I was 22, I think, John McTiernan, who did Die Hard, Predator, and Red October, he married a girl from high school who was a good friend of mine. And he made a film, his first film, The Demon's Daughter, in 16 millimeter, and shot it in Westport, Connecticut. And I was 21 years old, and I was on the Niagara for like some of the time. I was the sound guy. Other days I was the production design, because I can write and draw. I mean, I can draw and do some sculpting and physical things. And so I helped with that, and so I got to meet John. And so
how was it working with John in his like first film?
He was a kid. He was like 20. We were both 21 and 22 with 16 millimeter. He was just out of school, and John is he's the real deal. He understands film craft. He has an eye. Mm-hmm. He understands how sequences go together. He was very, very good. He was very professional at that age. But it would be a decade before he then broke through.
Right, and that's a good message to everyone listening. Someone like John McTiernan, who is arguably one of the best action directors of all time, and he basically created Die Hard, which is basically the model for I don't know how many ripoffs in the course of the decades to come. Even still to this day, people are ripping off Die Hard and Predator, for that matter, two of the greatest action movies of all time. He took a decade for someone to go, this kid has talent.
Yeah, no, that's true. And so he got back into Juilliard, and his wife, I think, was production managing at the Met, maybe. I may have that wrong, so check that fact. But anyway, John did go to Juilliard. Then he came out and did corporate, moved out to the West Coast, and he was doing corporate films and just shooting, kind of like I did. Mm-hmm. And somewhere, and I don't even know where the connection came into theatrical. But he everything he was doing was pointing him in that direction, and that's what he wanted to do. He just was making a living shooting anything he could. And so by his early 30s, he was already, I think he did, I can't remember, Nomads.
Yeah, Nomads.
He wrote the script. Mm-hmm. And I can remember my sister was at she was at Viacom in New York City. And she knew that I knew John. And so she said, hey, you know what I got? Internally, I got some coverage on your friend John's film Nomad. And so it basically, what it said was a glowing report about John. They said the script was pretty good, but they said this guy's a real director. And that was, I think, that got him into the business.
Now,
he was in the business to do Nomad, I should say. That was a
but
real
you know
move.
What I mean. But got him took him to the next level. Now, I want to ask you, since you've written shot by shot and you've discussed the craft so much in your career, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see first-time filmmakers make?
Wow. Well, I'm biased because, of course, I like to pre-plan a lot, and improvisation is great. But I see many directors who come in and they have not planned out their shots, and they wait to do it on the day they're doing it. They may have a shot list, but they haven't really, considering where the tools are today, they haven't done everything they can to eliminate wasted time, which is what it really gets down to. You got an 8 to 10 hour day, and that's the thing that. It's certainly one of the major controls or limits to what you're going to be able to do artistically. And everything takes longer than you think.
Always.
Yeah, so it just doesn't, in your head, if you're a new director, you go, we're going to do this and this. And then it goes off the rails pretty quickly when you get on set. Most of the time, because you're dealing with actors and they have their own pace and I remember once I wrote about the fact that someone was talking to me about directing two actors who work at very different ways. One who got things in the first 2 or 3 takes and didn't like to do it over and over, and another actor in the scene who he had to work with. And actually, it was Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor didn't like to do things over and over, and whereas Gene Wilder liked to kind of build up and. So those are the kind of things that get on set. So I'm sort of a little off track. So first-timer mistakes, I would say not planning your shots out with even thumbnailing it. Mm-hmm. And I think doing, I've seen people come in without not knowing how to do a rehearsal, a blocking rehearsal. Mm-hmm. So I think that's.
Explain. Can you explain what a blocking rehearsal is for people who don't know? Sure, you go and
set. Right. So you're going to shoot your scene. And you're ambitious enough that you want to have multiple. You're going to have establishing shots. You may move your characters around the room a little bit. You'll have shot reverse shots. Some things that are going to look like covered, but some things that are not. So you have to figure that all out. So you go into the location and with your actors, and you basically start to do the scene. But it's a rehearsal. There's no shooting. You're not at that point, and you might take an hour. You might take 45 minutes in the morning to go. So everybody's talking. So the block where you're sitting there with the DP, and now if you're starting with really no idea, and you're more of an actor's director, you should have had some conversations with your DP and looked at some movies and things. But let's say you're pretty raw on that first day or third day, whatever it is, and you're going to basically walk through the scene with the actors and then say, well, could you go here? And they're going to say I don't feel comfortable. Why would I go there? Well. Let's find a reason, and then you work it out through the dialogue with the intention of whatever that actor is supposed to be doing in the scene, and you're asking them to do things sometimes that is extra work for them. And by that, and I'm talking now about an actor, say they don't like to hit their marks, having to move around the set, and any complex choreography is a distraction to the actor. So those are things you have to learn to do, but that's what a blocking rehearsal is. You don't know where they're going to stand, sit, when they're going to get up, when they're going to sit down. Well, if they're sitting at a table for the whole time, that's easy. But what happens when they're not and you want to use the room more? Mm-hmm. So that would be that. And then that also includes walking through that with the DP. So the DP is saying, okay, we can do that, and I could move the camera. Well, how much extra time is it going to take? Well, we got to move the furniture here and relight this a little bit. And so you got them and the line producer and your production manager and your AD, and you're conferring on whether or not it's such a great idea to do the dolly shot or the boom shot, and how much you're willing to give up. If you do that, you may lose this at the end of the day. So those are the kind of decisions that are being made during a block rehearsal. But if you storyboarded it first, you eliminate a lot of that.
But isn't it true that directing is basically compromising? That is the biggest thing that directing is. You're compromising constantly because of things and elements that are being thrown at you on a minute by minute basis on set.
Absolutely. Then that's exactly what it is. Everything is a negotiation between the actors and your ambition, artistically in a good sense, and then all the other people who are there kind of to make sure everybody stays on track, which is the line producer down and the DP. Mm-hmm. And much of the time, lighting is the time-consuming part. Mm-hmm. And so that's how fast is your crew and what are you willing to do. Now, with the new tools, you can go back after the fact and do some cleanup in lighting that you otherwise couldn't have done. But then, that's extra expense, and you can't do everything that way. But we're moving in a direction where you can. But right. I mean, you're going to be able to extract, you or me right now, you look at us, we'll be able to extract. I mean, this is possible now, but it hasn't really been streamlined. And you would be able to get a rough model of your face that moves with your face, and you could track in new lighting.
Oh yeah, and DaVinci Resolve has right. It's the facial recognition and the tracking on it is insane. Right. You literally could start pulling out the bags under my eyes, and it's pretty insane. But if you don't have that skill set, it is going to cost money and plenty of it. Right. So either put those tools in your toolbox or just light the damn scene properly.
Right. Well, and the DaVinci that you're doing, that's great. And there's also Beauty Box, a number of things out there that do similar stuff. That's a 2D facial recognition, and it works, through a certain amount of rotation. Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about doing it in 3D. So, and it would get everything. It would get the headphones. It would be a rough. You could substantially relight.
You could, but that's really costly. That is time. Costly
now, but what's costly today in 4 years will be free from Blackmagic for a new feature. I'm serious.
In the new Resolve package, right? In the new Resolve package. Right. Now, how should a director break down a screenplay? I think that's something that is really not taught, and it's something that directors really don't even think about. Like when you read a screenplay for the first time, what a director should be doing in actually breaking it down? Because I've spoken to a lot of craftsmen, people directors who are just craftsmen. They just understand the process.
Yeah.
And they have specific, like, okay, boom, 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 boom. It's almost creative. It seems almost non-creative, but it is creative because it's almost like a blueprint. But how would you suggest that?
Well, first of all, I think that very important to do a table read and to get your actors, if you have that possible, if that's in the budget, whether they're available or not. Sometimes those things aren't the case. But before you're shooting, because when you hear your dialogue the first time, it's a very different thing from your actors. It's always a surprise, and you have to adjust. So I think that that's usually the first step, even if it's just a couple of table reads, maybe only partial cast. But once you have that down, then you start with your script. And now this is Judith Weston has written a terrific book about preparing, probably by far the best one, in fact, on the subject. But it's very actor driven. It's not really visually driven. So since I mostly write about the visual side, even though I've gone to acting classes and gone through and done a fair amount of those kind of workshops, visually when you break it down, you are drawing little boxes in the margins of your script, and you're closing your eyes and you're going through it line by line. And who's is this a close up? I mean, you usually know kind of, okay, we're at a dinner scene, and let's say that's a simple one because people are seated, and so you're looking at that and you're going to break that down. So that probably means you're going to do over the shoulder shots and reverse shot, reverse pattern. So that's kind of set for you, but at the same time. You may want to move the camera at some point. You want to know, do you want to do a two-shot? And what a lot of directors do, and even Spielberg and others, and many of they'll screen other films. And at this point in their career, once they've been doing it for a while, this is less of an issue. But I know Spielberg was talking about looking at films at night when he was doing Close Encounters. So you'll get a sense of how a basic style for the film. So Gordon Willis, the DP for, let's say, Godfather, did things differently and with different lenses than, say, a Steve Martin comedy. So in which they're using much wider lenses. So you listen to the actors. You get a new sense of what your dialogue sounds like and how people play together. Then you have sort of a sense of the style. It's going to likely longer lenses. Is it a comedy? You're going to go wide. You're going to exaggerate, and then you're going to sit down, and then it's the line by line. And because you let an actor speak through the whole scene, indicating cuts is not really all that critical. Because I've set up an idea or of a scene that's primarily locked into over the shoulders and such because you're not moving. But then you go line by line, and on an emotional basis, you have to say what line has to be emphasized, what doesn't. So I go for the emphasis in the line. I go for turning points in the drama. And I really sort of do what would be a description of the flow of the scene, because a scene has a beginning, middle, and end. And you have to identify when the most important. A lot of this is for the actors. It's not really just in other words, it's what I need to be able to say to the actors. And breaking it down, I'd also have notes for the actors. What intention can I give them? Because you don't want to say, move to the left and do this. And sometimes you do that for an action, but you don't do it for a performance. Mm-hmm. So in terms of breaking the script down, that I usually go through, and it's just a lot of notes in the scripts, and then I retype it separately outside the script and give myself a little bit more room for doing storyboard panels. And
So the one thing that you were saying in regards to coverage and things like that, and over the shoulders and things, I've noticed that a lot of young film directors, myself included, when I was starting out, we tend to kind of try to do these Scorsese style shots, or these kind of Spielberg-esque kind of shots, which, they're either very convoluted. I'm going to reflect off of this light, and I'm going to do a Kieslowski over here. Then I'm going to grab a Hitchcock and a Truffaut over there. And they do these kind of insane amount of, visual, and I hate to use the term, but visual masturbation almost. Yeah. In the sense that it's not propelling the story. It's propelling their ego, but it's not propelling the story. What's your experience on that? Because I think a lot of first-time directors that I've seen, and I did it myself, is we go to so complex when you bring that kind of that kind of shot or shots to a seasoned DP or seasoned first AD, they just look at you going, all right, kid.
Yeah.
I mean, because I feel it's just not moving the story forward, because shots should move the story forward. So
of course,
the question basically is, when should you move the camera and why should you move the camera? And, kind of goes along with that first question.
Right. Well, I think you're right. Back when Orson Welles did Citizen Kane,
right.
That was the movie that, even in its day, the critics were saying, wow, there's so much technique exposed here that we hadn't seen before, drawing attention to how it's put together with all these, aggressive techniques. And but today, that's the way things are. That's sort of the base level ambient. There's going to be a lot of technique. Mm-hmm. And so you're absolutely correct. Everybody wants to do the vertigo shot once in their career, the zoom and the push in and all those. And there's a long list. And actually, there's books out there, even from Michael Weese, about the 100 most important shots.
Yes. Yeah.
It's like, well, okay, that's fine, but that doesn't really help you do a scene. For me, what kind of director are you? I love technique, but at the same time, it's the story is everything for me. I have to get that part right, and that's not easy. So I don't want to have to burden myself with a lot of exercise. But really, you will know when you won't know, but you'll learn when the time is to do something more. It has to have a really, really, really good reason for being there. And how do you know? You do it by continually going back. Am I telling the story? You remember, in other words, you analyze it, as I mentioned, from really from a line and a emotional arc point of view. Then you get that into your head, and that's kind of what you're doing. That's the highway you're on. It's not a highway to technique; it's a highway to the story, and then you build from there. Now, one other thing that you mentioned, these shots where they're aggressive technically, but there's also something which is the sequence shot, because the opposite of doing something with a lot of special techniques is coverage. Well, there's also the master shot, which has disappeared. Spielberg is one of the few who still does it, where he'll do a scene without a lot of cuts, and he'll move his actors instead of the camera. Mm-hmm. You don't see that much of that today. I remember when I saw the second Matrix, I was all the visual effects scenes, all the action scenes looked great, and then they had really boring and not particularly well done scenes, but which are dialogue scenes. They were like, wow, that's kind of old. That doesn't really live up to the rest of the movie. So anyway, in terms of sequence shots, I like sequence shots because I think some people overcut. And producer investors and such are nervous about it because it doesn't give them room to make changes later. Once you do a sequence shot, it's very difficult to suddenly cut into a medium or a close-up. It breaks the whole mood. So it's kind of a one or the other scene and one or the other way to do things. But that falls into the category of being something that people trying to do a complexly choreographed scene. Well, sometimes there's a really good emotional story reason for doing that.
Right. I mean, if you go back and look at Scorsese's, I'll bring out Marty's work at first place. Like if you go back to Taxi Driver, where there's so many shots that we, us filmmakers, because that's the prerequisite. You have to watch Taxi Driver if you're a filmmaker. I mean, you have to watch most of Scorsese's work if you're a filmmaker. Sure. But you go back and you look, and some of those shots that people want to grab, or in Raging Bull that you want to grab, when he does it, there was a really good story point for him doing it. It's not just like when he does the 9-minute no cut Goodfellas shot. Yeah. Going through it completely is about telling the story, but he does it in a unique way, as opposed to sometimes I see filmmakers will just try to replicate a shot purely to say that they replicated the shot. Right. Like the Jaws shot, the Vertigo shot, which everyone thinks Spielberg came up with it, but I think it was Hitchcock first, if not even before that.
It was Vertigo.
It was Vertigo.
Yeah.
But the way he did it on the beach with this and that, how many times have we seen that? And sometimes it's appropriate. I've seen it, and I'm talking about major television shows, major movies. Sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it's not. But that's a director going, "I need my Spielberg shot." So it's what we do. We pay homage as much as we can. But if you go back and actually study all of those guys, all of them will have a very specific story point to them, and it's not just I can do this because I can do this.
Yeah, and Spielberg never moves the camera unless there's a reason for it in the story. It's just that he thinks in a way of telling a story in a nonverbal way much of the time. Mm-hmm. And that forces those things. But all the great directors of the 70s were terrific craftsmen, but they were all story driven. I don't think they knew or were trying to achieve something that was technically that. I hope you're able to cut this.
No. We leave it. We let it go flying, sir. Go ahead.
Oh my God! All right. So anyway, I'm sorry.
It's all good.
So, but anyway, so those guys were all very, very disciplined, but they had stories they wanted to tell. Mm-hmm. They didn't have a problem with finding material, and so anyway, I think that you're probably doing too much with the camera if you ask yourself how is this helping this moment? Well, I'll read these few sentences here. I'm doing this with the camera. Is that really the best thing to do? Mm-hmm. And so if you go through your own stuff, I suppose, in a day, so we're doing, here's how I conceive it. I'm talking to my DP now. And, and I write down a list. Here are these 5 techniques I want to do. I want to circle the table where these people, it's this card table. 5 people playing poker. I'm going to do the camera with a 360. That's another cliche. And something then you would have to ask, well, what's being said? Why are you doing it? And there may be a good reason. But sometimes there isn't. But I'm not sure the people who want to do it in the first place are that attuned to the drama anyway. I mean, I know a lot of young filmmakers who are really interested in the technique. They're really more like DPs. Mm-hmm. And the story, they want to do the story, but it's not the characters, and you talk to them and it's just not the first thing on their mind.
Right, which is insane.
Yeah, and that tells you something right there. So, but I come from the story side.
Right, and most good directors and good filmmakers come from the story side because we're here to tell stories. We're not just here to make a music video. I mean, if you want to do technique, go to make a music video. Right. Go make a commercial. Go make an art piece where you can throw the camera around. And with today's technology, things that used to cost a lot of money to move that camera, you literally could do now for a few $100. Crazy. It's insane. You could do a 120-minute, non-cut movie fairly easily on a technical standpoint, not on a choreography standpoint, but on a technical standpoint. You can get somebody to walk around with it, and I've had many filmmakers who've done that on my show. Where before that, what Hitchcock did with rope, that was a thing. It was very, very difficult to move that camera and keep it going. You had to do tricks and all sorts of things. Well, then you couldn't go continuously because you had to change magazines. 10 minutes. Every 10 minutes you had to change the magazine. Now, I wanted to talk real quickly about the director on set. And I always try to tell people this when I have young filmmakers talk to me is understand that you have different department heads. So you have your DP, your production design. Those are the 2 biggest collaborators on a technical standpoint on the set. Would you agree with that? Of course, there's costumes and then there's sound and first AD. But if you have not done your job properly as a director by casting your crew, I call it casting your crew. If you don't have a good working relationship with them, they will smell your uncertainty about what you're doing. And many times then everyone else's agenda starts to fight and it takes over. And then you got all these things coming at you. And it's really difficult for especially a first-time director to even deal with that. So what advice do you have when you have a rogue crew who doesn't respect you as a first-time director and is going off trying to do their own thing or have their own agendas, and like the DP's like, well, this movie's going to blow, so I'm just going to create something for my reel. I've seen that happen. Sure. So what's your opinion on that? Well, I think it's you're asking me what happens on the day of the shoot, and it's already too late. So this is something that's you're done. Yeah, it's fixed by preventative medicine. Really, is you come in prepared. Mm-hmm. And that's what a director's, that's what he has to do. And he has to do it with the individual members of the department. Now on set, it just becomes a political issue. You get everybody together and I suppose you just say, look, guys, I see what's happening right now. Mm-hmm. And here's my agenda for the end of the day. Here are the things I want to accomplish. Let's figure out how we can do it. And I need less conflict. So that you could do. But the best way to not be discovered as really not being prepared is to be prepared. Right. So it is the script breakdown. It is a shot list.
and storyboards if you can do it. Storyboards don't have to be that difficult. For many things you can even do a rip-o-matic if you had to.
Oh, I remember rip-o-matic. Can you tell people what rip-o-matics are? I did a bunch of those. Those are fun.
Sure. Well, if you want, they're usually done to sell, to pitch a movie oftentimes, but you can use it for anything. And the basic idea nowadays, and with live action at least, is that there are so many action pictures and so many explosions that you can actually make a trailer for a movie. And if you're really good at it, no one will know that it's pieces. It's Frankenstein. It's made up of the pieces of like 9 different movies. And you can do this. I mean, how many times has New York been blown up by aliens or in superhero movies, New York and San Francisco. And when a building goes over, if you needed to come up with your own movie when you've got a city destroyed, you can get those shots no one will ever know. And you can color correct and do things. But you could do the same thing, a rip-o-matic for a scene. And it's basically you go say, all right, I've got people sitting at a table. How many times has this been shot in a movie? 1,000, and I can go online, I can find that. So you find those things and then you can recut them. They don't even have to be from the same movie. They don't even have to look that close. You're just going for lenses and you're just going for framing. And you could put together literally you turn the sound off, of course, and then have pretty much most of the shots you would have for your scene. And you could probably, let's say you have a typical 4-minute scene. You could go get footage from other movies that look like your movie and just cut them up and make it. And once you see it, even though it might look silly, maybe you've got a girl and a guy's part because that was the best angle you could find or whatever, but you would suddenly, okay, this is long, this is that, I could do something else. You would get to see it. Storyboards do the same thing, but rip-o-matic's pretty fast. And right now there's software I can go. It used to be I have to do a screen grab from YouTube.
Right. I was going to say you could just do screen grabs and paste them literally on paper for the shots that you want.
You can do that too, and or if you want to do video. Yeah. Video work, that's really taking it to another level. And, it sounds like, I'm copying somebody. No, you're just getting a sense of this complex thing that's going to happen from these pages of paper, which don't tell you very much about what the scene's going to look like. And, and if you do it with actual cuts and motion, even if you only did it a couple of times, it's a great learning experience for your own. If you did, you take a scene and say, how would I do this? And sometimes you can't do it, but, depending on what the situation is.
And I would like to just clarify something, too, for everyone listening. A lot of filmmakers are like, I'm copying or I'm stealing from directors or I'm stealing from this shot. I don't feel right about it. I'm like, we are all stealing from D.W. Griffith, from Edison, from the guy who put the camera up and made the first medium shot, the first two shot, the first over-the-shoulder shot. We're all copying those things, So it's just what artists do. Everyone, you look at what they've done in the past. There's technique, and you model yourself after that technique, and then you make it your own. But a 2-shot's a 2-shot. A medium shot's a medium shot. It's not stealing.
Right. Right. And if you go look at the films for like the Golden Age in Warner Brothers, for example, and I loved their film work. I thought they were fantastic. And Arthur Edison and Saul Polito and Tony Gowdy and all the others who were their DPs, they had house style. They definitely had house style. So if you grab any one of 250 films, the way they do the over the shoulders, the way they do the close-ups, their fulls, their singles, all that stuff is done in a way that's the Warner Brothers way. Now it's not, certainly MGM and Paramount did, there's a lot of overlap with them as well, but Warner Brothers had a very specific look.
Oh yeah.
And, and the way that they moved the camera was their own. Well, so they were copying themselves. They made, 15 or 20 years of pictures all within that framework. So, and I learned a lot from Warner Brothers when I was a kid. There was a studio that I most, I guess, identified with visually. And so I watched those films over and over. And so that, I could probably say the same of Spielberg. I think that sort of his base level was Warner Brothers and Universal. And their very dramatic black and white stuff. But but you are copying at some level, but you're being influenced. At the same time, that doesn't, once you've gotten that and you've laid that down, your own personality will definitely seep into it most of the time, and your actors are going to be doing things, and you've got a production designer, and all these different forces are going to, basically give whatever you're doing something that's different and unique compared to what was done in the past.
I mean, I always argue, I'm like, basically Tarantino is the greatest remix artist of all time. I mean, that's all he does. He literally takes shots from movies, like, and I'm not even saying homages, literally takes them and puts them into his movies, and literally takes concepts and storylines and but he puts it all together in such a unique and powerful way.
Yes.
That he is a master, but he is a remix artist. Unlike anybody I've ever seen in cinema history. He is a unique filmmaker without question.
Yeah, and what's interesting, what you're saying is that he is a pastiche artist at some level, but at the same time, his writing and the way he works with actors drives these stories. I can remember in, what was the crime thing?
Jackie Brown.
No, Jackie Brown was fantastic. That was an amazing film.
Yeah.
But no, I'm thinking of the other one with before that, his first big,
no, Reservoir.
Yeah. So Reservoir Dogs. And there's a scene where two of the gangster friends are getting and they're sort of roughing up each other in sort of the mafioso leader or the organized crime leaders. And it's an incredibly put together scene. No one else. When I saw it, I said, wow, that was an amazing way to write that scene. And it's something that's not been done before. It was really, that was fantastic. So that drives it. So anything he does with the camera is secondary, even though he is a stylist.
Oh, you could tell a Tarantino film from frame one.
Yeah.
And that is something. Can you define style, if you will? Like what? Like, and I know that's a very difficult question to ask, but like there are certain directors, and I always use this as an example too. Like you see a frame of Tim Burton, or a sequence, you know it's a Tim Burton movie. You see Spielberg, you see a Scorsese, you see a Coppola. There are certain things, but then you see a Ron Howard movie, and there's not a Ron Howard feel to it, though he's one of the best craftsmen by far I've ever seen. So there's just kind of like, McTiernan, Tony Scott, Ridley Scott. I mean, what is there anything that you can suggest? I don't even know if there's a question here. Maybe this is just a conversation, but is there anything that directors can do to kind of like stamp their style on a film?
Well, that's interesting. I think by the time you get to be directing, although they're much younger and younger directors, you're kind of, I wouldn't say you're divided, but you're either come from a visual side, or you come from an actor's side. Now, Robert Altman, one of my favorite directors, was not a visual stylist, but early on, Vilmos Gismund shot super long lenses in MASH. And, Altman then used it for the rest of his career, but I don't think that was his idea. At least that's not what I've heard. And he adopted that. But he was only interested in the actors, really. And he got these amazing performances. So that's one. And Ron Howard is an actor's director. And from the time he got started, I just, when he did Willow at ILM and the visual effects picture, and before that, in interviews and such, he was talking about how he learned the visual side of the business. Now, when he said that, he was probably in his 20s. And he had been Opie on TV so he'd been around the business for a long time.
For his entire life almost.
Right. So he said when George Lucas told him, go and get a camera and shoot something. And, well, that was kind of late in his career in a way. So by personality, he was from the actor's side and not from the visual side. So how do you become a visual person is really the question. Because that's what we're talking about for style, I suppose. Although you could have a style in the way you work with actors too, and that would drive some of the visual. But I think the question you're asking is how do you become a visual stylist? Well, you kind of have to immerse yourself in it and do it. Spielberg was shooting from the time he was 9, 10, or 11. Most of the directors who are really visual start very young because it's photography for them first. Or at least that's a big part of it. But if you wanted to develop it, you basically have to go study the visual arts. You have to go and look at movies. But I hate to say this, but I think some people either have a gift for it and they've done it and they're drawn to it, or they're not. And there may be some very small percentage of that totality of people who are very visual but never really discovered it yet, and then they become visual. But by and large, I think the world is made up of the people who are comfortable with the actors and that, and they're just not lining up shots. I mean, I know I've been asked to help and train people who don't come from the visual side, and at the end of the day, they kind of want to turn it over to their DP, and they want to work with the actors. So they're not looking to do, and that's how I see the world mostly in my experiences. And there's this division, and there aren't a lot of wonderful visual stylists out there who need to be helped to become visual stylists. I think you kind of grow into it.
But you can be helped, but a visual stylist can be helped to be an actor's director or director's actor or actor's director much easier than an actor's director becoming a visual stylist. That's
a fantastic point. I never thought of it that way before, but I think that's a very shrewd observation, and I think it's 100% true.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Ridley Scott's work, and by the time Ridley Scott did The Duelist, if I'm not mistaken, was his first film.
His first picture,
Yeah, he was in his early 40s and had directed commercials for 20 years.
Yes.
So he knew the craft inside and out. Same thing with Fincher, same thing with Bay, same thing with Spike Jonze, and these kind of guys. I mean, they just had so much style. I mean, you look at Bay. Michael Bay is all style. But arguably, and now we're getting off the topic for a second, but not on the topic. Arguably, when The Rock came out, pretty much every action movie after The Rock, everyone was trying to basically do what he was doing. It's kind of like what happened with Die Hard, but like visually, I mean, it's before The Rock and after The Rock, which am I wrong? I mean, all action movies kind of started to turn into Michael Bay extravaganzas. He had such an impact on action films that everyone kept trying to steal from him. Am I right?
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think he certainly his kind of cutting, which is discontinuity cutting. Now that had already sort of appeared, in we have traced this in the 1950s. We had it. There was it was the avant-garde, and we began to see more handheld camera, and there was cinema verite, and that was an influence to television commercials, yet less so in motion pictures in the West and general commercial films. And but then it crept in commercials, and there were a few directors that started to do sort of discontinuity cutting in commercials, and that was like in the I would say 80s? When it became 80s, late 80s into the 90s, and that was a change. Anybody was doing that, and everybody was doing shaky cam, and that was more like late 90s, and that all led to what Michael Bay was doing.
Right, without question.
And what essentially the eye is always trying to make order of these little shots you're throwing at them, and there's a higher engagement at the most base level of perception when you're doing what Michael Bay does, because you're having to really pay attention, because it's not all making as much sense as you normally would have happen.
He's not. He's not a fan of the master shot.
Right. Which I am. I like that. We look at Roma. And Roma to me is like it's an incredible. I know people who said, I saw it on TV. I said, well, don't go see it on TV. Go to a movie theater and sit reasonably close to the screen so you're not at the back, and just let it sort of sweep over you, because that's what, if you love film. And but yeah, that kind of filmmaking is in short supply at the current era.
Without question. Now, one thing I always talk to young filmmakers about is production design and how powerful a visual style it can help you with, because especially in the indie world, you've basically got a white wall and maybe maybe a potted plant, and it's not even the corner of the white wall. It's literally a white wall, and that's, where the scene is taking place. And you're just going, man, you just don't even know the ABCs. Like, at least give me some depth. Go back, throw something in front of the lens. Give me something. Production design is such a powerful part of this whole process. And can you talk to people listening what the importance is of production design in creating a look and creating a visual style? Because if you look at a movie like one of my favorite movies of all time, The Matrix, I mean, that the production design in that movie, not to mention the visual effects and stuff and the color palette, but the color palette, all that stuff was production design. That was production design mixed in with color grading, mixed in with the lenses, mixed in with everything. So can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, certainly the production designer is one of the key people on a film. But, if we're talking micro budget, you can be smart. You gave me, example of a white room. I've got to shoot something like that myself fairly soon. So what would I do? Well, I'd get a quilt. I'd put something on the wall. So one end had a painting that was red, blue, green. And on the other side of let's say it's a long conference table, which is what I'll have to be shooting. And, so yes, I will have different things on all four sides of the room, so that there will be some geography that you can grab on so you know where you are. Now, a production designer would be doing that and much more, because he would not just be choosing random objects to sort of help us find out where we are. Everything would contribute to what the story. So what color is this thing that you're putting on the wall behind this actor? Should it be red, blue? What is that? What is it representing? Maybe it should be neutral. And a production designer goes through the entire script, and he's working at the story level. For example, in Chinatown, Richard Silbert, who I knew reasonably well, and Dick was a great production designer, also ran a studio at one point. And when he did Chinatown, he said he wanted Jack Nicholson to be going uphill much of the time when he was going to home, because in detective shows you're going to one residence or location, and as often as he could, they were going up a hill, and they chose their locations like that because it was effortful. He was always having to make the effort. And it was a very subtle thing that was in the background, but those are the kind of global decisions that someone will make in the beginning of the thing. So you'd say, okay. And they also wanted to have a lot of water motifs going through, which they did. He sees the guy washing the car and it's squeaking. They made a little moment. It tells nothing for the story. It's just a little mood thing, but it advances the whole notion of that LA is a desert town and needs water. But the production designer is in charge of the color script, meaning that for every location you could go to, in his mind, it ought to have a color and a color scheme and lighting scheme to support the action. They may say, we need to be backlit. I want us to have him to look at the character. We can't see him so well. I want all these scenes shot like that. And so there are all these mood-driven visual decisions that the production designer will go. The DP and the editor and the director will also, have something to say. But the production designer is the guy who organizes all this. But it's a cost for a micro-budget film. You can be smart, but.
But I mean, in all honesty, though, in today's world, there is a cost. We're not trying to create the Matrix. We're not building sets out. But there are techniques that you can create, like when composing shots, to make them more interesting. Even a white room, you could throw something in the foreground, defocus it a little bit, kind of like, a pan through something, give it a depth. Depth is something I see that younger filmmakers don't understand depth, which is a visually stimulating thing. And it could be easily like, if you're shooting in your apartment in Van Nuys and you're shooting your web series, why not put the camera in the kitchen and shoot through all the open stuff, but the scene's taking place in the living room? That just makes it more visually stimulating, as opposed to setting up a master shot in front of a white wall and they're sitting on a couch. Like, it's not as stimulating. It's not as, but so there are things with composition and just placement of camera and not even camera movement that can give you a bigger budget feel. Would you agree with that?
Sure. Oh, absolutely. And again, people tend to, if they're not visual, they want, they're going to shoot someone saying something, they're going to want to fill the frame with that person. And, good filmmakers know that withholding material is sometimes more compelling, and exactly what you're saying. So you've got a living room in, let's say, a medium-sized apartment. You've got a kitchen, and the kitchen has got an open, I won't call it a window, but it is a window into the other room. So you can see someone in the kitchen, they can see you. You could have someone shot, and they're small in the frame. If there wasn't the kitchen barrier in your way, you're doing a full shot from head to toe. And so what you're basically seeing is like you got this at a distance, the audience is going to lean forward to hear that. They're going to, that's going to make them engage more. It makes it feel more like a real room, and what your experience would be if you think of it from the point of view that even though it's not directly a POV shot of one character, it's like, well, if I'm moving around this room and this conversation is taking place in real life, and they invite me over for dinner, I'm the third person, and I walk around and see them, how would I see them? And so that would be at least one way to keep yourself honest in terms of the shot size and how much you show or don't show, because it would force you probably to push things away quite a bit in stage and depth. Right. And, and people can come to the camera, they can go from camera, and even not even having someone in the scene. So let's say you did something in the kitchen, and the guy, you've got a window, but there are other barriers, and maybe you let him, instead of saying, oh, no, I can't see you now, get back in the shot. Don't go to when you go to the refrigerator, turn around, let him go out of the shot. Mm-hmm. And so you still see the refrigerator door open. There's light changes of light in the room. He's only gone for a few seconds. He comes. Those are things that pull you in. And you could even take it further. so that the actor could go into, let's say, a bathroom, leave the door partly open, and that's a whole nother thing. So he's washing his hands or he sits on the toilet, whatever's going on, and you don't see him, but the door's enough open that you can hear him.
Right. It's Hitchcock.
And right. So that, yes, he would have done that sort of thing. And so all those things are used. But again, the technique, I think, that sort of gets you in that direction to say, okay, well, let's say I'm not shooting a movie. I'm just in the scene. I'm this extra person that came over to hang out with my friends. And I sit on the couch because one guy's at the kitchen table, the other guy's in the kitchen fixing food, or the girl is. And so I'm looking from back and forth. And, okay, those are shots. How big are those shots? And when this guy talks to me and says, hey, Jack, would you like a drink? And yeah, what do you want? Comes from the kitchen. You look, those are shot sizes. And then you could say, okay, that sort of sets the key signature for these are all wide medium shots. Okay, so I do that but I'm going to need a couple of close-ups. So where will I get those from? And then you add those, and then suddenly you've got, as you're saying, a space has been defined, which feels like a real space.
Right, and it's visually simulating much more so than just shooting against a white wall. Unless you're Wes Anderson, and then that's how you shoot everything, and it's okay because that's a style, and that's a very specific style that he has.
Yeah.
And it works for him. I don't know why it does, but it does work for him very well.
I love his films. I love his films.
I love his films. It's just, but he shoots everything like that, and even when he moves, I saw one. I forgot what movie it was, where he shoots it and it's dead center. There's no rule of thirds. There's nothing. And then he pans across like to the other side of behind the scene, all within one shot, and then lands in the exact same framing. It's just so wonderfully done, purposefully.
Was it Moonlight Kingdom?
I think it was Moonlight Kingdom. Yeah, it was. I think it was. It was just so brilliantly composed, but yet so simple. He's not a Scorsese-esque moving of the camera kind of guy. It's all composition. He's a little bit like a Jim Jarmusch with a little more energy. It's all flat frontal. And a lot of production design. Oh
yeah, well, and in a very stylized way. But in Kingdom, to me, I just love the way it's shot. Because it's so different than I would ever think to do something, which is why I like it, I guess. But it was also driven by the script because you have Bob Balaban as the narrator. Mm-hmm. And so he comes in, and so it has this odd mixture of referencing a music score and a history of the island in this particular storm. And that's part and parcel of the whole visual style. He's interrupting it. It has a sense of almost like composition you might find in a book or in an illustration rather than in a film, or at least in classical Hollywood decoupage. So, but yeah, he's probably the most significant stylist working in American film. I mean, others we named have a style, but not like Anderson.
Anderson's literally a frame of Anderson's film, and it's an Anderson film. Yeah. But for everyone listening, when you study Wes Anderson, look at his films are simple, but deceivingly simple because the framing it's textbook framing.
Yeah.
But the way he does it and what he puts in that frame and how he puts everything centered, like that's his thing. He dead centers everything.
Or does the dolly shots are always the same? Yes. They stay absolutely flush to the plane.
Yes.
And he'll get one moment to another moment and he just lays them out in a row like the Boy Scout camp, which was very funny.
Oh, Budapest, Hotel Budapest. Oh,
same thing. Right.
Yeah, he's wonderful. I know. Look, we have two directors. We're going to geek out a little bit on the show, guys. I apologize. We're going to talk a little bit about it. And one other tip I wanted to throw out there, and I want to see if you agree, for low budget films, especially when you don't have a lot of production design or your sets aren't particularly that interesting, using longer lenses to defocus dialogue scenes really just adds production value. Would you agree?
Yeah. I do, and there's also now we're talking about spatial relationships, and if you have a very wide lens, for me it takes you out of the scene. Mm-hmm. And when Gordon Willis shot The Godfather, he shot slightly longer lenses for everything. I think like a 70 millimeter.
Yeah, that's pretty.
So it did have a little bit of a longer feel, but once you're in the film for the whole way, you never felt like you're looking at long lenses. It just had and what it does is it compresses the middle ground, background, and the foreground in such a way that there's more dimensional connection to the viewer. Mm-hmm. And when you do ultra wide, it's kind of a disconnect. And here's sort of why. If you were to sit in a movie theater, look at the screen, there is, in fact, a mathematics about what focal length, in a way, that is. I'm sort of glossing over a lot of neuroscience here because we don't actually – because we make a single image of lots of saccadic patterns which are moving all over the place, scanning an object. But from the perception point of view, what we think we're seeing or the way we're seeing it, if you have a very wide-angle lens, then the math would say that for you to be in the right place for that lens, you've got to be 3 rows back from the screen. And if you're doing a telephoto – you would have to be all the way at the back of the scene. So, but we're changing lenses in a movie. So there are certain lenses, what we call the so-called normal lens, and a little bit longer, which create a more palpable feel of spatial relationship between the viewer and the screen. And now you can break that. For example, in Citizen Kane, we have the scene at the very end when Kane is smashing the room. And the camera is put very, very, very – that's a super wide-angle lens, and we're meant to have distance from him. We're separated from him. But ordinarily, longer lenses, a little bit longer lenses have a lot of value, and I don't know why they're not used more. The iPhone automatically gives you a wide-angle lens. So unless you can lengthen the focal length and you're shooting with that, you're creating a very depthy kind of spatial relationship in your shots in a way that it's not as compelling as maybe a longer lens would be.
But then you look at someone like Kubrick, and then he shoots with his 9.8 super wide and Clockwork Orange and Shining to an amazing effect. So
sure,
it really depends on the art. It's never the plunger, it's always the plumber.
Right.
It's always the master behind the tool, because if you give Spielberg a wide angle lens, I promise you, he's going to make it look amazing if it works for the story.
Well, it also has to do with when you're using a wide angle lens, the further the character is, you're talking about, when you talk about Kubrick, he's shooting locations rather than faces. Correct. And so that's a very different. I would say that's a different category of use of wide-angle lens because there's nothing that close to camera. So some of the distortion goes away. It's what I was talking about, creating a certain depth. It was when there's a character in the scene, not necessarily a close-up, and you're trying to bring them into some kind of believable relationship with through lenses in the spatial relationship. Then you probably would. I don't want to say you have to shoot longer, but that's something which produces a comfortable feel for a certain kind of scene. The wide angle would be right for something else. But yeah, another thing Kubrick did, he never did reverse shots.
Yeah, you're right.
And also Otto Preminger, a director that's greatly underrated, he was very frontal, but he moved the camera. And so you go and look at something like In Harm's Way, a 1964 war picture about the aftermath of Pearl Harbor. And it's a great-looking film, shot by Greg Toland, who shot Shane. And it's a great-looking movie. It's an absolutely great, and you can want to see it as stage actors and to move the camera. Very, very, very few reverse shots in his style.
Yeah, and like when you look at a comedy, it's shot with, lenses. Like if you're going to do a dialogue scene, it's going to be a long lens with all the sparkling lights in the night scene behind them, completely defocused, as opposed to it all being in focus.
Well, that's like a romantic.
Correct.
Comedy.
Yes,
but a comedy would be
flat, a little bit flatter.
Well, then people end up shooting wide a lot, because they think it gets a caricature if that's what's right for your. All these things relate to the kind of story you're going to be doing. In the old days, they shot test for everything. The old, every actor was shot from different lighting, whether it was Clark Gable or Bette Davis. All those people were shot over and over again, almost for every movie. And they do all the costumes, and they would do. It was black and white then. They did color test. That came later. But all that preparation goes into kind of understanding what was the best lens for an actor or actress, and they don't do anything like that today.
No, it's sometimes at the bigger, higher studio levels when you got $200 million, they're gonna do a couple of screen tests. That they'll do. Well, screen tests, and that's for casting. But yes, they will go test other things, costumes and stuff. Yeah,
right. But even there, it's almost like it's not as important. Well, even today's because you can go, can DI it later.
Yeah, or or the costume's going to be CG.
Right, but we just have so much control now that I just find all the time people they're short-circuiting the process. So whether it's script development, whether it's table reads, whether it's production design meetings that are a little go more in depth as a collaborative effort between the creative team in advance, all those things you see less of in people. I'm just going to go make it.
Right.
And people go out, and sometimes they do well anyway because the writing's good and the dialogue's great.
If you got a good script, that's always a good starting point. And if you got good actors, that's the second point. And then if you can make it look decent, then you've got a hit.
But if you do the first two and you only do an so-so job on the third, how it looks,
you got a hit.
You got a hit. You're going to make it work. So that's it. Really, a single actor can carry a movie.
And again, I'll go back and not to beat up Ron Howard because I actually love Ron Howard's work and he's an Oscar-winning director. Yeah. But he is one of those guys that his films aren't extremely visually stimulating, but his performances, his stories, you look at Cinderella Man, you look at Beautiful Mind, and they do have visual style to it to some extent, but it's not Ridley. It's not Scorsese. It's just not the way he directs, but his story, Apollo 13, Apollo 11, excuse me, it was amazing. Yeah. Those kind of films.
And I think also he shoots a tremendous amount of coverage. He's got a master series on.
Oh no, I saw it. That's why
I have not seen it.
For anyone listening,
that's good.
It is by far the best masterclass I've ever seen because Ron literally sits there. Ron, like I know him, Mr. Howard sits there and literally directs a scene from Frost Nixon, which is also Frost Nixon. By the way, is a masterclass of how to shoot a very confined space. I mean, seriously, and make it interesting. It's fascinating to watch. But he shoots this kind of walk and talk kind of scene 7 times, I think, with different budgets in mind. So he's like, okay, so if I have 3 cameras, this is how I'm going to shoot. And he you literally are sitting there for an hour and a half watching Ron Howard direct. It's fascinating. It is you just sit there going, amazing. Because okay, and if you got an indie budget and you got 1 camera and you've got 30 minutes to shoot this is how I would do it. And he goes in there and he just does it on the fly. It's like he's such a craftsman. Such a craftsman.
Well, he's been doing it a very, very long time, and he's a nice guy, and I think very buttoned up as a director. So I've seen little excerpts of it, and I guessed it was going to be really good. I had that feeling, but did he direct Parents?
Parenthood?
Parenthood, right?
Yeah, he did.
And I heard him talking about it. This is decades or 15, 20, whatever, a long time.
89. It was released in 89.
Wow. Okay, so it was a long time ago, and I heard him talking about it. And they were talking about 5 cameras. And I'm going, 5 cameras? Oh, yeah. Then that's a very actor's way of doing things. Oh, yeah. And, it prevents them from moving the actors because the actor will always go in front of a camera. Or, you have a very confined space when you shoot that way. So that's something I would, I don't think that way or probably wouldn't do things that way.
Well, he shot, I remember him shooting Far and Away with Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. Which I love that movie. That movie, he shot over 1 million feet of film.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It was so much footage, but that's how he shoots. He just shoots the hell out of it and covers the heck out of it. And then in edit, he finds the performance. He finds that thing. And that's just his style of doing it, as opposed to doing a whatter.
Yeah, right. Well, Spielberg, you look at how much his gigantic blockbusters are, and they're always $60 million, $40, $50 million less than everybody else. They're not 200. They're like 110, 80, and it's because he's just so buttoned up, both on the set and off the set. He comes in, but he talks about early in his career, I think at the AFI, there's some, maybe on YouTube, where he's in a couple of classes and he was talking about Jaws, and the guy's probably like 25 or 26 years old. And he's talking about how they storyboarded the entire film. Same thing with Duel. Yeah. Right? I think there was a lot of mostly storyboard the whole film. Mm-hmm. He did that for the first few films, and I can remember much later in his career when he said, I'm still not storyboarding, and now I'm not storyboarding everything. Mm-hmm. But that's because he had 10 or 12 movies under his belt. Right. And by that time, preparation. That's what shot by out. And so in a way, if you want, all the things we're talking about don't just happen. And they definitely don't just happen on the day of the shoot. Your first day, that stuff, there may be for the first day, there's weeks and weeks and weeks of prep.
Yeah, without question. And anyone listening, please go watch Spielberg's films. Like he's a masterclass in watching his stuff. I mean, you could still watch Jaws today.
Oh my God!
And it holds 110%. And there's
Beautifully
no
shot.
CG. There's no CG in it. There's nothing, and it's still terrifying to watch. And it's just such a masterclass in film directing.
But even the family, the Americana family scenes are wonderfully done. At the table when Richard Dreyfuss comes to the first time and has dinner, and the three of them, Roy Scheider, his wife, and the other character, all three are there, and look, it's very simply shot, but it's just beautifully shot. Where he pushes in when the son comes in, and it's anyway. He's certainly one. He's probably the greatest living Hollywood style director out there in terms of the precision of his work, and the breadth of the shot flow. Now we have newer players who are breaking more rules, but Spielberg has done that a little bit of himself. Although I don't particularly care for it. In some of his more recent film, he's resorted to some more modern techniques. But he's the only one doing what he did so well. I'd rather see that.
Right. I mean, you look at someone like Nolan or Fincher. Both come from school of Kubrick without question.
Yeah.
They both said it very frankly. Yeah. They're students of Kubrick's work, but Fincher and Nolan are extremely different in style and everything. But yet you can see that undertone of Kubrick in both of their works. I think Nolan more psychological and framing more Fincher. But Fincher also was a director who directed 20 years of commercials before he ever.
I think it was was he an art director at ILM?
He started with Return of the Jedi as an art director at ILM, and then slowly worked into commercial work, and then became one of the biggest commercial directors ever. And then Alien 3, 7, Fight Club. But you watch 7 and Fight Club, which are two of my favorite films of all time, and they're just stunning. Just the style just oozes right off the screen. Yeah.
And Fight Club was so unusual from the Chuck Palahniuk novel that that was added to all his films before that were sort of, I wouldn't quite call them genre films, but they story-wise weren't breaking out anywhere near as Fight Club was really quite different.
Oh no, Fight Club is one of my top 3s without question.
Yeah. Terrific film.
Very, very good film. Now, I wanted to ask you something you talk about in your book. Opening and closing frames. It's something that they don't talk
open and close frames.
Yeah, open and close frames. Can you please tell us a little bit about opening and close frames?
Well, if you have a Hallmark card of a snow scene with a little house, it will be it's framed in such a way that it's very cleanly framed. Everything you need to see is right in the middle. There's a border of sort of open space around it. When we have open and closed frames in photography, it would be like right now, if I was cropped, or I was a little bit, so the notion being that you're withholding more. It's more like you would see things in real life, where Michael Curtiz, the Warner Brothers director, very responsible for the style of almost all their films, was he was always putting things in the foreground. Mm-hmm. He was always now he didn't use open and close. I mean, he didn't use open framing enormously, but some. I mean, a lot of people overframe. So in other words, if you want to know about open and closed frame, just start looking at movies with 3 and 4 actors in the frame and see if you see them all framed and the 2 outer actors have space around them. That's a closed frame. And if you want to do open framing, then you'll cut them off because it looks more realistic, I suppose. It's more verisimilitude-ish. And closed frame is over framing. It means that you're leaving too much space around the actor. It's not really how we see things in real life. And if you do things where it's an open frame, where things are moving in front of you, or the actor is partly cropped out of the frame, you're giving a little bit of a haircut. If there's multiple actors, that's when you really are aware of it, mm-hmm. because you might have the camera bisecting. Mm-hmm. So the frame is over here, and I'm on the edge of the frame, but here's the edge of the frame. Now, mm-hmm. I'm not the main guy. He's over here, but that kind of thing would be. Was that a reasonably good explanation? Yeah,
that explains it. I'm thinking as you're talking, I was thinking of examples. So like Wes Anderson's style is pretty open in the way he frames things, but it's still not overly open. But he would never cut a guy off on the edge. Like that's
No.
never in a million years will that happen. But then you look at someone like Sergio Leone, and his framing, which is, I mean, epic. In like Once Upon a Time in the West. No, Once Upon a Time in the West. That opening sequence. Is that the movie? Is that the right one? That opening sequence. Yeah, when the guy gets off. That is open. Once Upon a Time in the West, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that opening 5-7 minutes is some of the best cinema ever shot. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, when you think about an over the shoulder shot, where you've got an ear and a head, that's you're cutting off. Why don't we see the whole head? Well, because you don't need to.
Right, and it would be kind of disruptive to, like, if someone's talking and then you've got a whole blurry back head, it just doesn't make a lot of sense.
But in Jaws, Spielberg does a thing early in the movie when they're, some of the downtown Americana scenes, and I can't remember exactly. It might be the mayor, but he comes down out of a house, and then the camera turns with him, and his head is right in the middle of the frame briefly as he's going through. But I remember when I saw it, I was like, wow, that's an interesting way to do it, and it was not obtrusive.
Right.
It just felt like it put me in the picture. That's a lot of what Spielberg does and what we're talking about. And that's a difference. Maybe that's what I left out with open, close framing. When you do open framing, you're putting the person in the scene. They're not looking at it like it's a canvas on the wall or a picture through a frame. You're in there. And it implies that there are things behind you going all the way around continuously. So when you give too much framing space around them, it looks like a picture.
Right. Which Leone was very known for.
Right. And when you go in, when you're doing something where you're messing the frame up more and you're having things around you, you're putting the person in the picture, and they're in the environment. And I think is probably the main difference.
Now, one last question I have for you. Some basic cinematography concepts that filmmakers and directors should understand. I understand they don't need to be cinematographers. We're not all Scorsese or Spielberg who understand lenses and understand the craft of cinematography at a different level. But what are some basic things that directors, especially first-time directors, should know?
Well, I mean, you know it by learning it. So I think you should everybody should grab their iPhone not an iPhone, a camera where they can change the lens. And I mean, it can be a fixed zoom. But it doesn't have to be you can change lenses out. But anyway, you have to be able to move through the focal lengths. And then you should be going out and shooting, get a couple of friends together, sit in your apartment at a kitchen table and shoot that scene with a wide lens, with a medium lens, and with a telephoto lens, and go all around. And then go and you cut that thing, and that's your first lesson as a cinematographer. You're going, oh, okay. I think almost everything, I think if you set yourself up little projects like that, and those are easy today, and they're fun. If you're a filmmaker,
you should be doing it anyway. You should be doing it anyway. The
next time it rains hard, you take your camera and get some kind of plastic bag to put it, and you shoot the water coming out of the gutter down spout, and you go around picking up the water coming down and going into a drain, and you look at and you just shoot a whole. Make that into a 1 minute piece with music, and say, okay, I'm not even going to use melodic. I'm going to do drums. I'm going to put it together, and then tomorrow I'm going to do the exact same thing with a different track with different music, and I'll do that. So it's less about rules about cinematography than actually going out and trying to put sequences in a row that form a sequence that are interesting, and you'll learn more from that than anything I could do as a list. But if you want to prompt me to, what kind of things I'm not sure I answered your question.
You answered your question. I mean, lenses are something that basic understanding of what lenses are, like what a wide, what an 18 does, what a 45 does, what a 70 does, what a 120 does, what a 5 does. These basic concepts. Lighting, basic 3-point lighting should probably at least understand the concept of basic 3-point lighting. I would also argue that you definitely need to understand framing. So understand the rule of thirds, basic stuff.
Well, those things, there are some cinematography books out there. I Shot by Shot covers a fair amount of that. I have not seen a really good cinematographer's book for a while, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, it's a cinematography. It's cinematography back in the day. I remember it was called
Chris
Cinematography.
Malkovich.
Yeah, that was a really great book. It was that was kind of like the side accent book to your book. So it was kind of like it really kind of goes deep into it. But there really hasn't gone. There hasn't been a whole lot of stuff that's come out in recent years, but there's still plenty of stuff out there. And for God's sakes, YouTube. I mean, Jesus.
You can sit there, but here's the deal: none of that. So you get that will tell you what the table of contents of your own personal book of what you need to do is, or your do list. Then you basically have to go do it.
Yeah, and learn it and shoot the rule of thirds and understand why, and then break that rule and understand what the 180. Oh, the 180 rule. They're going to cross the line. Please, and that took me it actually took me a minute to learn that. It was like the concept of the 180 degree rule, which you can break, of course, but you need to understand it. Yeah, and there's real specifics to it that if you don't,
I've been in edit bays where I've seen professional stuff come in and they made a major mistake and they had to flip the shot.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
And then it happens. But if you're moving people around a lot, you will be in danger occasionally if it's a complex scene because sometimes, wait a second, he was here and I know I should be here for the 180, but then he moved over here. Do I pan with him or do I move over? You can find so you get these situations. If the situation is that hard to figure out, usually it's not that important.
Right.
It's not one which is not a glaring error.
Right.
And if you got a little bit of coverage. But again, it's the same thing. If you boarded your stuff out, I mean, you can. Well, for the last many years, I've been working in animation, and everything there is, the entire movie is done in story reels. Of course. And they're so sophisticated now that they're not just storyboards popping one to another. The guys that I work with, like Dave Lux, I mean, Dave, when he you can he goes through his storyboards, he brings them to show you. So he'll do a scene, you sign a scene, Dave does the scene. And then you're clicking away in Photoshop because he builds it in layers. But he's doing it so quickly, it's because there's like little motions and blinks and head turns and that kind of, it's almost like low grade animation when he does. And the whole movie is done like that by, 6-7 story writers or story artists and a head of story. And then you put the whole thing together and then they put it up. It's got music, it's got sound effects, it's got dialogue, it's got a scratch track. And it has, maybe some After Effects motion put into it for certain things. And, it looks like a Saturday morning TV show in the old days when there was still Saturday morning animation, like He-Man and She-Ra, very simple, but it was there. And sometimes it was way more sophisticated than that. And then you would show it to an audience. You'd get your notes back, and then you'd have another 5 weeks to make adjustments, show it again, more adjustments, show it again. Now, with Pixar and Disney, that's years. But ordinarily, it's about a 12 to 14-month process to build that whole thing out. And you can do it to live action. That's what Spielberg did. And that's why his films look the way they do. They're incredibly precise because it was perfected over. And it wasn't just he storyboarded it. He storyboarded to look at it. And then they kept, let's do this differently. Let's do this here. And so it was progressive refinement. And now I know that's a lot of work for people, but it's gotten a lot easier since you can shoot with an iPhone. You can shoot the still pics. You can go get your, now if you're making a big movie, it's you
have teams, you have departments, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and you also have previs companies like through the third floor, Halon, and.
I was watching Fincher because I'm a huge Fincher fan. I mean, he previs to an extent that it's almost Hitchcockian. Where he makes the whole movie to the point where he gives it to the composer to score to his previous because that is how he's going to shoot the movie, and he just goes out and shoots it exactly. There's no wiggle room. Like I've already shot the movie. It's already shot. We just have to go out there and actually film. Right.
Well, there's a couple of things about that are usually advantageous. Is one, the studios can't screw around with it afterwards and come and do another edit because there's no footage. It's a jigsaw puzzle. It all fits together one way.
Yes.
And that's what Hitchcock did. That's called camera cutting. Hitchcock did it. John Ford did it. Famous story about John Ford. I think it might have been in one of his later films with Maureen O'Hara. And she's sitting in a carriage, and in the far, far, far distance, tiny in the frame, is a silhouetted character standing there. And someone asked him once, why didn't you, that's so, why did you do it that way? You never had a close-up of, these are the two characters in the scene. You had no close, he's just like a black silhouette. And he said, why didn't you shoot the medium shot? And he said, because the studio would have used it. And he said, and he was right. It's magical because he didn't do that. It would have absolutely been ordinary had he moved in to show us what the guy was thinking or how he was reacting as the woman was leaving. So that is one of the reasons why it's done. It also saves a lot of money because you're not shooting coverage.
Now, I'm going to ask you a few questions I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
What advice would you give a filmmaker wanting to break into the business today?
Well, if you're a writer, write. Right. There's a lot of scripts out there, so that's a difficult thing. And it's not so hard to make things anymore. The hardest thing is access. Mm-hmm. Now you get it's been the theme of a few things I've said here is that make it. There's no excuse now like there was when I was a kid when it's making something in 5 minutes long that had to look pretty good and you were going to do revisions and things in 16 millimeter in today's dollar would have been like $5,000 or $6,000.
Right.
So I'm going to go shoot for the next 2 weeks, summer vacation and have this thing and then I'll edit for a week. And well, guess what? That was a lot of money. Today it's the money is that. That's what it costs you to put it onto your MacBook Pro, whatever you're using. And so the advice is go make something and don't bite off more than you can chew. For example, I'm doing something now, which I mentioned I'm directing shortly. It's like almost like a one-act play. Mm-hmm. And I didn't write it. It's written by a friend of mine. And she but we talk all the time and about the subject. And I say, write something simple. Write something in a really limited location because if your dialogue's good, it'll work. She can be a phone booth. I don't care. Mm-hmm. If it's really, really good, you'll be famous because you shot it in a phone booth.
Well, there's a movie called Phone Booth.
There is a movie called right. Well, right. That. So go. So it doesn't matter what it is. It's like the first of those that really became famous was My Dinner with Andre.
Yes.
Which was nothing more than two guys talking for 90 minutes.
And it worked.
So it was it was a breakthrough film for that director. Mm-hmm. So that's you have to have something to show. That's all that really counts. And as I say, make something that's shootable. Don't make something, you can say, I'm going to make a sci-fi thing to compete with these guys. It's going to be 7 minutes long, but it's going to look as good as a blockbuster. Mm-mm. There are guys who are, and you'll see people online who've done that. And they're typically
visual effects artists.
Visual effects are absolute. That's it. Visual effects artists now are putting stuff up and some of it looks, oh my God.
Because they're doing all the work themselves because they have the tools in their toolbox to do it.
They have the tools, they have the know-how, and some of the assets they can get. There's a lot you can.
Well, look at District 9. I mean, the District 9 short film. I looked at it. I was like, my God, that looks amazing. I mean, it looked literally almost as good as anything the studios were putting out. And then you get but he was a VFX guy. He came from that world.
So we're right. So that's happening, and of course, because of the nature of what we're doing today, so that rocks the boat over at the studios and who are doing mostly blockbusters now. But what if you don't have that interest? Maybe you really like working with actors and you like New Yorker short stories, and that's the kind of thing you want to do. Mm-hmm. And then TV is where you're going to go, and you're going to have to produce something for that. But if you do anything that looks really good, that's enormous. Then do something that I didn't do growing up, which was to network. Network any way you can. It's time consuming. It seems like a waste. It's better to network after you've got something to show because it is time consuming. I'm not saying it's a bad use of your time, but in LA, you use half a day just to get someplace, go to the meeting, go to the party at night, and learn to market yourself. I mean, put up a website, get a Wix site, put it up, do something with your filmmaking. Everything has to look absolutely world class. And if you do that, and then you start to network, and you have some way, you got your iPad, you have ways to get, and it's always an uncomfortable thing to do because some people will just kind of treat you badly, but a lot of people will help other people out. But if you can get something they look at, then that right off the bat, if someone hands me an iPad and I look at it in a minute and a half, I'll know in 40 seconds whether this person knows what they're doing, unless I'm looking at titles. But if it's the actual thing, right? So the thing is stored, I'm looking at it, and I'll say, well, okay, this is pretty good. Give me your business card. That is more likely to happen. So that's I think is really the key. Okay. Key thing is to make stuff.
Now, can you tell me what book had the biggest impact on your life or career?
Well, there were two when I was very, very young. And so it probably may not be so pertinent now, but I read a thing called Ray Fielding's Special Effects Cinematography, which was the only book of its, and it was a professional book. It was made really for professionals. It was not a how-to book for film students. He just wrote a book on the subject for people to understand at the level that he knew it. And so it was about optical. So that was one. And the other one was The Parade Gone by Kevin Brunello, who's one of the great film historians out of the UK. And that was about the silent era. And I got that when I was probably 12 or 13. And, for no particular reasons, those were the first two film books. And then shortly after that, within a year or two of that time, when I was end of junior high school and into high school, I had discovered that the Westport Public Library in my hometown had a film section that was pretty good. And I started to go through that. But there weren't many books back then.
Yeah, I know.
Not like today.
Yeah, even when I was coming up, there wasn't a whole lot of stuff either. Now, what lesson took you the longest to learn, whether in the film business or in life?
To keep my mouth shut.
And listen more?
Not be so honest about what I felt. Like, how'd you like my movie? Well, it's pretty good, but it failed for me in this way. And I would do this to almost, I can remember, I won't say who it is, but let's say a top 10 commercial producer. And he had a project he wanted me to help him with in China, and it looked like we could do it. And he invited me to over his house for dinner, and it was a big party, and there were all people from the business at a high level. And I remember I sat down, and it was one of the films he and his partner had made, and I just kind of went into my critique of it. And it wasn't really terrible, and they were okay with it. But I realized as I was driving home, I said, yeah, it probably wasn't the best. So through my life, I would say I can't remember who it was I was reading about in the last 2 months. And it was one of the, Hollywood moguls. And he was saying, leave your ego at the door. Now, I don't have a huge ego, and I'm when I work with people, I do like to listen, and I have no temper whatsoever, kind of calm guy. So, but I'm not the world's best sales guy from the point of view of glad handing everybody and going around and working the room, and it seems false to me. But I've seen a lot of people doing it who've gotten to do things that I haven't gotten to do. So that was, and it's still true to this day.
Fair enough.
I like people who are forthright, and forthright doesn't always play well in the movie business.
Yes, they have the best FUs in the business in the world.
I'll give you another example. I went to a book festival in the last 2 weeks, and they had a big panel about Marvel, and there were Marvel people working there. And after like an hour, they were all so obsequious and about them, because there was one Marvel semi-executive there, and so I love it. And I know these people, and I know they have other ambitions and have a different background in their writing. I'm going, come on, it was just too much. Just too much of it. Oh, I'm so happy about this, to be here, and it's so great to do this, and blah, blah, blah. When really what they want to say, okay, I'm glad I get the paycheck. This is fun. The money's really good. And we're doing but I'm really tired of this kind of, the same cliched stuff, or when I've got this thing I want to do. But I'd be more likely to get into that than some other people.
Fair enough. Now, what is the biggest fear you had to overcome when getting into the business in the first place, making your first film?
I think anytime everybody has doubts. I mean, that's, you'll be in the middle of a project, 2/3. This often happens at the 2/3 or 3/4 mark on whether it's a commercial or a short subject or whatever it happens to be. And suddenly it's like, you look at a book and suddenly the words don't make any sense anymore. They just kind of look just like these shapes. Well, that you're looking at your own project, which you've now looked at 350 times, and you just disconnect. The original emotional connection to it just kind of disappears, and you're like, oh my God, what the hell is this thing? What have I done? I've got this string of shots. No one's going to like it. I'm embarrassed. And if it's in a rougher shape, it's not quite done. Every time you add a little more music, a little more sound effects, it gets better and better, and then you come out of that. But that's you do have these little panic attacks whenever and it's healthy to have them. It's because if you're not having them, you're a megalomaniac.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
And simply not really looking at this thing carefully. But that's happened to me. 70% of the projects that I do, somewhere in the middle of it's like, oh my God, I should just walk away.
Right.
And actually, in the commercials for Ron Howard's Masters series, he's got one running and says, one thing about every single project, it'll break your heart.
Yeah, that's true.
It is true. So there's some of that. But yeah, so I didn't have. Well, I shouldn't say that. A few times when I first stepped on set, I never had a total panic attack because I'd been doing so many pieces of it on my own, and I'd really gone out of my way and recognized that I would have to study film to understand film, and that went on for years before I got a chance to do anything professionally. So, but
fear and doubts, fears and doubts.
They're always there, and in terms of being on set, like this thing I'm going to be doing in a few weeks, I'm nervous because it's a very big cast, and we don't have as much money and resources to really plan it out like I would like. So, I'm thinking about it all the time. Okay, is this really going to work? And so now I've sort of resolved that I'm going to take time off that I don't have to do a little more storyboarding.
But isn't it fun though? Like when you have that, like what if? Isn't that what kind of keeps the whole thing going?
Well, yeah, risk junkies. Movies are good for risk junkies because it's you're doing something in which you can only control about 60 or 70% of it. Beginning with
lucky.
The actors.
Yeah.
If you're lucky, you're lucky. That's true. And with the actors, you just don't know. We're doing that now. My friend had cast the movie, and I basically said these three people aren't working after the first rehearsal. She had cast before I came in, so we recast them, and that's. Those are my fears. That really makes me worried is the people that we still have. Are they going to be able to do this the way we want them to? Are they I can't talk too much about this because some of the cast may see this, but no, it's
I get you. No, I get you.
If you don't have that, what's the fun? If
exactly.
You're not worried.
Now, what are three of your favorite films of all time?
Oh my God! Well, I'm an older guy, so I'm going to go further into the past, but I love all different kinds of film. But I would say of the really, The General by Buster Keaton.
Yes.
The Third Man.
Mm-hmm. That's come up a few times.
I'll read. It's a masterpiece. The Godfather.
Of course. That's also
and a few things by Sugarland Express by Spielberg.
Yeah.
And not because I think it's a great film emotionally in depth. I mean. You should have caught me off guard here. I mean, there's many older films I think are masterpieces.
There's many, but those are three or four that you come to your mind right now. It's a very difficult question for anybody to answer
because it's more than 10 or 15 or 20, and that's still only a fragment
of what's
out there of even good films. I mean, I would say also probably. The Last Emperor, and not because it's a perfect film, but because Bertolucci is one of the great camera stylists, and it's absolutely
stunning,
gorgeously done. And the way he moves his cameras down. There's one scene with Peter O'Toole and I forget, and then the Emperor, and the camera starts at the ear because it's about audio and goes down. And comes up, and there's sounds outside the walls. The Emperor's never really left the Forbidden Kingdom. Not Forbidden Kingdom, the
Forbidden Palace.
Forbidden Palace, thank you. And then the camera pans around the walls. It only sees the walls, but it hears the sounds because the world isn't. And then it's this one shot and ends up going back. And you watch the movie, you're completely unaware the camera's moving, but it's telling a story in a way which is highly, highly cinematic.
Now, where can people find you, your books, your work?
Oh, well, the book is from Michael Weesey Publishing. You can find it on Amazon. It's called Film Directing Shot by Shot. But if you type in Shot by Shot or my name, Stephen Katz, you'll find it.
And you have another book. And you have another book as well.
Yeah, that's true. Cinematic Motion was the second book, and it was also a bestseller, but it was pretty much eclipsed by the first book. Uh-huh. And I did learn something. I did try and do, the second book was about Cinematic Motion was about sequence shots, heavily choreographed scenes. Well, even though the book is valuable and it has some really great interviews and such in it that I think everybody should read, but the business about doing these long sequence shots and storyboards really was better left to video. like a YouTube series. At the time, it wasn't possible back in '92. But, I would consider, if I were to do that again, or I do some more class work on video, I would probably do kind of what Ron Howard did, only with more. He doesn't move the camera that much.
Right. So, all right. So you can find them on Amazon. And do you have a website or?
I do. Shotbyshotbook.com.
Okay.
The shotbyshotbook.com. It's just being populated now. We keep adding storyboards from different artists and directors, and that's going to continue. I haven't had a chance to get the blog going very far. There will be a technical gear section, which I'm getting,
which will be updated on an hourly by hour basis, I'm assuming. So
unfortunately, no. And yeah, so that's kind of and you can find me. Actually, there's no email mechanism there, but you can reach me through my publisher. Sure. Anybody who needs to do that.
All right, Michael. Stephen, it's been an absolute joy talking to you today. It's been great. It's been a film student's dream come true to talk to you for so long. To talk to you about talk shop with you. So thank you again so much for dropping some knowledge bombs on the tribe today.
Hey, well, Alex, thank you so much. And now I'm going to be a follower of the site. And so we got to catch food. We got to grab a pizza or dinner sometime because you were literally 15 or 20 minutes from me. So
thank you. I want to thank Stephen for that epic conversation and for dropping an immense amount of knowledge bombs on the tribe today. Thank you again so much for taking the time out, Stephen. If you want to get a link to the book and anything we talked about in this episode, just head over to the show notes at indiefilmhustle.com/347. Now, I wanted to give you a quick update. I've been promising a big announcement of something over the last few weeks, and I've been kind of busy and kind of sidetracked by all this distributor stuff that I've been doing, trying to get the word out on the distributor bankruptcy, shuttering its doors, and all the damage that it's doing to filmmakers. But next week, I finally will be releasing this next big thing that I have been working on for a while. So please keep an eye out for it. And guys, I'm going to ask this of you from moving forward on. I'm going to ask everybody who listens to do this small favor. Please introduce this podcast to 5 of your friends. 5 people who are in the business. Just recommend it. Send an email, give them a call, drop a text. Just recommend it to 5 friends. And when they start listening to the show, tell them that they have to pay it forward with 5 friends as well if they enjoy the show. I've taken this concept from my good friend RB Bato from Stage 32. He's been able to grow his amazing platform to over 700,000 people at Stage 32. So when he told me this, I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to use this for my audience, and I want to grow the tribe as big as I can because I really want to get this information out to as many people as possible. So thank you guys for listening. As always, keep that hustle going, keep that dream alive, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Indie Film Hustle podcast at indiefilmhustle.com. That's INDIEFILMHUSTLE.com.
Hear that? That's the sweet sound of Minute Maid slushies at McDonald's, turning up your summer with every sip, slurp, and ah.
Get a small sweet peach, blue raspberry, or fruit punch slushie for just $2. Or get any size soft drink for $1. Price and participation may vary. Limited time only. Cannot be combined with combo meal.
Let's be honest. There are tons of ways to send money back home, and every company promises me the same things: good rates and safe transfers. That's why it can be overwhelming to choose a new way to send money. I switched to Remitly because I can track my money every step of the way, which means I know exactly when my mom will get her money. And with their extensive payment network, my mom can receive her money in a way that is more convenient and safe for her. You should check it out. Go to Remitly.com or download their app to get started. Remitly Inc. is a licensed money transmitter by the state of New York, California, Massachusetts, and other states.